This is the MeTV.
Because of troubles at home and described him as quiet and hard to talk to, his motive is still unknown.
Here in KELO, Sioux Falls had another shooting last night. This one was outside a convenience store at the corner of 6th and Cleveland. While no one was hurt, police arrested 3 women who now face serious charges. KELO's Don Jorgensen joins us with more on the story and talks with the owner.
Angela, last night's shooting was a frightening situation. It happened in broad daylight at about 8:30 when several people were inside and outside the convenience store.
Somebody inside the car fired a gun several times.
Those gunshots rang out and shattered a couple of windows at the shopping cart at 6th and Cleveland. One window is boarded up today, and what police say was the result of a drive-by shooting.
There were several people that were outside the business at the time. There were people inside the business at the time. Thankfully, nobody was injured with this.
After witnesses gave a description of the vehicle, police were able to locate it and arrested 3 women who were inside. They face a list of charges, including aggravated assault, shooting at an occupied structure, and intentional damage to property. The owner says he's had similar shootings at or near the store in the past, which he says appeared to be random.
All of them have been not related to the business. It just happened to be personal confrontations that happen to be at my property, which is frustrating.
Dave Grevelo says there's not much more he can do to keep these types of incidents from happening.
You can't prevent this kind of a crazy crime. Crime happens all over town, but when it's at a busy corner like that, a convenience store, it seems to make more of the headlines than other stuff that goes on in the city.
Grevelo says over the years he has upgraded his security, mainly to keep everyone safe, especially his employees, which is his #1 concern.
I think I have 36 cameras on that property, and that's what helped with catching these people. You just have to have it.
And police are still trying to figure out who fired the gun and say that more people could face charges. So far, a gun has not been recovered.
A man is in the hospital tonight following an early morning stabbing in Rapid City. Police found the victim outside of a business on North La Crosse Street, just south of the interstate. Several people were helping with first aid. The man was taken to the hospital with life-threatening injuries. Witnesses gave the police a description. Police found the juvenile matching the description and made an arrest.
Developing tonight, South Dakotans will vote on recreational marijuana once again this November. Today, the Secretary of State confirmed the petition drive to put the measure on the November ballot was successful, collecting more than 25,000 valid petition signatures.
We've spent hundreds of thousands of dollars on the signature drive, and we're committed to this. We're not going to let the politicians get away with overturning the will of the people.
This new recreational effort is initiated Measure 27 and has several differences from amendment passed by 54% of the South Dakota voters in November of 2020. South Dakotans for Better Marijuana Laws say they've heard from many voters who are frustrated about the state's fight to overturn Amendment A. Their goal is to help this new measure win by an even higher margin this November.
Oh, we need the moisture, but it was pretty rainy and cool out there today.
Yeah, it was kind of a mucky day out there.
Yeah, gray, cool, and the clouds we have overhead are stubbornly going to hang over us again tonight. Going to be hard to get rid of those things. This is the way it looks right now in Sioux Falls. 54 degrees. That's 20 degrees below normal for this time of year. We have the north wind at 11. Sioux Falls getting a 1/10 or 2 of an inch of rainfall is all we got. Watertown also has thick clouds, 54 degrees there, but the whole western and half of South Dakota and the central part of South Dakota are in the sunshine right now. Here's the way it looks out in Rapid City. Temperature much warmer there, 68 degrees with boatloads of sunshine. There, the temperatures warmest in the west, 60s and 70s. That's where the sunshine is. And here's a look at the cloud cover. It remains thick right over Sioux Falls and the I-29 corridor. We'll have the clouds again tonight over those areas. And then tomorrow the clouds will break up in the morning, and then we'll have lots of sunshine across the region during the afternoon hours. So for tonight, cloudy Sioux Falls, low 42, clear, low to mid 40s north and west. Then tomorrow, Sioux Falls clouds in the morning, then sunny in the afternoon, 72, 75 Aberdeen, 80.
In 9, no.
You can see that, you know, there's some clouds, but there's also some blue in the sky there. But to the bottom pictures, Yankton and Sioux Falls, of course, were on the eastern side. Temperatures in the 50s with the clouds. So the lack of cloud cover making a lot of difference. Let's look back at midnight today, and we'll put this into motion. The rain has been mainly in southeastern parts of our area, and it's really just fizzled out now for the most part. A few sprinkles left across portions.
CNN's Boris Sanchez has their stories.
21 lives brutally cut short. 21 families now shattered by an act of violence all too common in the United States.
It's really hard to see what happened today here as a grandma. Yeah, it is very hard. I can't imagine going through that with one of my grandkids. My heart is broken for the parents here in Uvalde.
19 children now gone, just days before the start of summer break. None yet out of 4th grade. Like 10-year-old Uzziah Garcia, whose uncle calls him a great kid and full of life. He loved video games and anything with wheels. Uzziah's grandfather, Manny Renfro, calling his grandson the sweetest little boy he's ever known. Renfro telling affiliate KSAT he played football with Uzziah, that he was fast, could catch well, and remembered all the routes they practiced. And Amory Jo Garza, just 10 years old. After spending hours desperately searching for news of her Tuesday, her father Angel Garza posting the devastating news on Facebook. Quote, "My little love is now flying high with the angels above. Please don't take a second for granted. Hug your family. Tell them you love them. I love you, Amory Jo." Javier Lopez, also 10, was excited to start middle school. His mom, Felicia Martinez, told the Washington Post he was recognized in an honor roll ceremony only hours before the unthinkable. She said she'd never forget his smile. Quote, "He was funny, never serious." Jose Flores Jr., also just 10, his father, Jose Sr., telling CNN his son was an amazing kid and a loving big brother to his younger siblings. Always full of energy, he loved baseball and video games. Alexandra Anilla Rubio, Lexi as she was called, had just received an award for the honor roll the morning of the shooting. Lexi's parents describe her as kind and sweet, with a big future ahead. They tell CNN she loved basketball and wanted to go to law school. Her mother, Kimberly Mata Rubio, posted this to Facebook. Quote, "My beautiful, smart Alexandria received the Good Citizen Award. We told her we loved her and would pick her up after school. We had no idea this was goodbye." And 4th grade teacher Eva Mireles, an educator for 17 years. Her profile on the school district's website describes her love of running and hiking and spending time with her family. A family that includes a college graduate daughter, Adalyn. Adalyn posting a gut-wrenching tribute to her mother on Twitter, describing her mom as her best friend and twin, and calling her a hero, detailing how she tried to save the lives of her students by jumping in front of them.
She was a vivacious soul. She spread laughter and joy everywhere she went. She was a loving and caring mom, relative, teacher to her students.
At least 17 others were wounded. University Hospital in San Antonio is still caring for 4 victims, 3 children and one 66-year-old woman, believed to be the shooter's grandmother, who's in serious condition. Officials say the gunman shot her in the face before he ran into school and began his shooting rampage.
I see this in the news somewhere else, but not here. But it is happening here. You think it's big town, big community, but small town like Uvalde?
And Wolf, we've just confirmed there are 2 other wounded victims at Brooke Army Medical Center in San Antonio. Both of them adults, both of them in serious condition. Of course, we're going to keep monitoring their status and bring you the very latest. Wolf.
Boris Sanchez in Uvalde for us. Boris, we'll stay in close touch with you. Thank you very, very much. Let's get some more on the shooting investigation. Joining us now, Sergeant Eric Estrada. He's a public information officer with the Texas Department of Public Safety. Sergeant Estrada, thank you so much for joining us. First of all, just a day after this horrible, horrible massacre, how is the community, and you're there in Uvalde right now, how is the community coping with this incredible loss?
We're all very heartbroken. It's a very tragic, very sad incident. Just for me coming into this incident itself, I'm a father of 2 children, and it took me a while to even step out of my vehicle and know what I was about to see inside that school. But you know, we're all mourning, we're all heartbroken. Our condolences go out to the families of the victims. But one of the newest updates that we do have right now is that now we know that this suspect did not have any criminal history. Also, he did go into his social media and actually posted what he was about to do, right? So we have 3 different social media posts that he did post. The first one saying that he was gonna go shoot his grandmother. The second one where he actually did the crime, right? He actually shot the grandmother. And the third one that he was actually gonna go down to a school and he was gonna do a shooting there. Whenever he did arrive to the school here, he was encountered by a school resource officer who actually saw him carrying a large black bag. And inside that black bag was actually more ammunition. He actually dropped that ammunition and ran inside the school, where he barricaded himself inside one of the classrooms. And unfortunately, that's where he started conducting you know, his business of shooting innocent children, shooting the innocent 2 adults that were inside that classroom, and it's very unfortunate.
As you know, the authorities say that school resource officer sergeant actually approached the suspect before he made it into the school, but they didn't exchange gunfire. What exactly happened? Why didn't the officer engage the suspect?
So right now this is all preliminary investigation. We're still out there doing interviews with different officers that actually responded to this specific incident. As far as their engagement goes, we don't have details as far as if he did engage with his firearm or he didn't engage, but that's where we're at right now.
A Uvalde firefighter did tell CNN it took about 30 minutes from when the suspect arrived on the scene until the gunman was neutralized. Is that your understanding as well, Sergeant? Can you walk us through that timeline?
Right. So I can't confirm on the time frames, but what we do know is that the first initial call did come out around 11:30. That was the first initial call that came in, and that call came in as a vehicle crash with a male subject exiting out of his vehicle with body armor and a long arm rifle.
Can you confirm that the 66-year-old woman in serious condition right now at the University Hospital in San Antonio is the shooter's grandmother, who he says he shot in the face?
So that's correct. We did see with our governor and our director in this press conference that they did give that she did receive a bullet wound on her facial area. She was airlifted, and she, as of now, the last update was that she is found in critical condition.
Yeah, let's hope she survives. We wish her a recovery, obviously. Do you have any update at all on her condition? Will she be able to make it through, you think, based on what you're hearing, Sergeant Estrada, eventually maybe even shed some light on this overall investigation?
So we're hoping, you know, she makes it out, you know, alive and well. And our prayers are also with her family as well. But the last update that they did give me in the morning was that she was in critical condition, and as of now, that has not changed. But right now, where we're at in the investigation, we do have several different agencies here assisting us, from ATF, DEA, we have Border Patrol agents here on scene, and we have other state agencies, also our district attorney office, the local one here. So we have different agencies in play that are helping out with this investigation, but our Texas Rangers are the lead investigators for this investigation.
Sergeant Eric Estrada, thank you so much for joining us. I want to stay in close touch with you.
Get things done. We'll want to the former principal of Columbine High School.
Week of Columbine, I said, I just joined a club in which no one wants to be a member. They're all of our kids, and we need to come together.
The fear and pain especially raw in Buffalo, already reeling from the recent massacre there.
This thing with Texas, I think every day when you wake up, you worry about your children, and with these events that are occurring on a regular basis.
Here in LA, Police Chief Michael Moore says the department is working closely with the district, increasing patrols around schools and investigating behavior that might lead to future violence. Nicole?
Yeah, trying to be aware and alert. Nancy, thank you. Well, meantime, today, a hero laid to rest. The funeral of retired Buffalo police officer Aaron Salter was today, 11 days after he was murdered in the mass shooting at a Buffalo grocery store. Salter was a security guard at that store, and some say he was instrumental in saving victims that day. Marley Tuskus spoke with his former partner on the force.
Yes, Nicole, hundreds gathered to pay their respects earlier today. Aaron Salter was working as a security guard at the Tops the day of the shooting. Buffalo police say the 55-year-old shot at the suspect, who was wearing body armor, and was left unharmed. The suspect then returned fire, killing Salter. Police say it was because of his heroic actions that likely allowed others to hide or flee from the grocery store that day. Today, his loved ones reflected on the amazing person he was, describing Salter as a man of faith, honor, and valor. His longtime friend Nathan Goldsmith says it was Salter who got him to join the police force, ultimately before becoming partners.
I believe that he would want me to say that on one of the darkest days in the history of Buffalo, he made a choice to stand tall. He gave all that he had for all that he believed in, protecting and saving lives.
The emotional ceremony included full police honors. Salter worked as a Buffalo police officer for 3 decades. He leaves behind a wife and 3 children. Funerals for the victims of that racist massacre here in Buffalo continue through the weekend, the final one ending as Ruth Whitfield will be laid to rest this Saturday. Nicole?
All right, Marley, thank you for that. Well, police are still looking for a woman suspected of killing a professional cyclist after she was apparently hanging out with the suspect's boyfriend. Next, we have some brand new video of where that suspect may have last been seen. And some much needed relief for America's babies flown into the U.S. today. We'll talk about where it's going and how soon you could see it on your store shelves.
A town and a nation's heart broken.
Just confused.
Reporters live from Uvalde, Texas, remembering the victims and honoring the selfless heroes. On Balance, tonight at 7, 6 Central on News Nation.
Expectations. For every budget, camping has never been more affordable.
Gun violence, and we need to come together. We need your help as a media to help us get our voices out to what's really happening in our communities, in these rural areas. You know, speak the truth and let's talk about what's happening everywhere, everything, not just one topic or one person or one political party or one religion. Let's come together and help so that we're not remembered, so that there's not more cities marked by massacres and shootings. That's what we need to do. That's what I hope to tell this city and this community. Let's work together to help one another.
Pastor Marcela Cabrales, it's an unspeakably difficult time. I think everyone appreciates what you're doing for your community and meeting with those children as part of this path and process, and I thank you for joining us.
Yes, sir.
Thank you. We're going to fit in our first break of the hour. The president spoke again today. We'll tell you about his push. We'll also be joined by a Sandy Hook survivor, and later in the program, we're going to discuss what we do as a nation with this ongoing ritual, and what we owe each other. We'll be right back.
Matching your job description. Visit Indeed.com/hire.
for a while. Evusheld could potentially reduce the risk of infection, as he says. We've got to look at the available evidence before we can make a decision about whether it should be available. But I will make sure that the Department for Health and Social Care keep him updated on the progress we're making.
We now come to Leader of the SNP, Ian Blackford.
Now you can sell your policy, even a term policy, for an immediate cash payment.
Off, you never saw me here. Second off, I'll take your
plus years of clinical experience to provide.
Visited the scene of a mass shooting when he was in Buffalo, grieving with those families of those who had been killed at the grocery store attack. And now they're making this plan as the president is calling for new common sense gun laws in the wake of what happened in Texas, acknowledging, Wolf, that he doesn't believe new laws would stop every mass shooting from happening, but he argued today that something needs to be done.
We must ask, when in God's name will we do what needs to be done to, if not completely stop, fundamentally change the amount of the carnage that goes on in this country? To state the obvious, and Corey and a lot of other people here, I'm sick and tired. I'm just sick and tired of what's going on and continues to go on.
Now, during those remarks earlier here at the White House, Wolf, the president said he does not believe the Second Amendment is absolute. He says there are limitations to it. And that, of course, comes, as you've heard, from Republican senators on Capitol Hill pushing back on Democrats' calls for new laws in the wake of this shooting. The president also called on Congress to approve his nominee to lead the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms. That body has not had a confirmed director since 2015, and the president called on them to pass and to confirm him now.
So important. All right, Caitlin, thank you very much. Caitlin Collins at the White House. So let's discuss what's going on with Congressman Jim Himes of Connecticut. Congressman, thanks so much for joining us. A decade ago, parents heard the worst news of their lives at that fire station near Sandy Hook Elementary School in your home state of Connecticut. How devastating is it to know that a whole new group of parents in Texas have now heard that same horrible, horrible news?
Well, Wolf, as you point out, those of us who live in close proximity to Sandy Hook, we know in a very special and horrible way what it is like for a parent to be told that their young child won't be coming home that day, that young child, rather than coming home to a snack to play with their friends, has been brutally, brutally murdered by someone with a gun. And we still have not, in this part of Connecticut, recovered from that. And what makes it particularly horrible is that this stuff doesn't need to happen. There are ways to stop this, and other countries have done that, and we could do it and be consistent with our Second Amendment rights. But time and time and time again, we choose not to, for a whole bunch of reasons. But we choose this world. And as your correspondent pointed out, the funerals have only just begun for Buffalo, another brutal massacre perpetrated by somebody with a gun. We choose this, and it's awful enough to go through emotionally and psychologically what the parents are going through in Texas, but to know that it's going to happen again, maybe tomorrow, maybe next week, makes this just almost hellish in its horror.
It's so horrible. I want you to watch and listen, Congressman, to some Republican senators, how they're reacting to urgent calls for action right now in the Congress, in the Senate and the House. Listen to this.
We have in our Constitution our Second Amendment rights, and I'm not interested in taking away rights from law-abiding citizens.
Inevitably, when there's a murder of this kind, you see politicians try to politicize it. You see Democrats and a lot of folks in the media whose immediate solution is to try to restrict the constitutional rights of law-abiding citizens. That doesn't work. It's not effective. It doesn't prevent crime.
Any firearm is potentially dangerous in the hands of a deranged lunatic. At the end of the day, the issue here is not the firearm.
So let me get your reaction. Are these Republican senators that we just heard from, among others, the ones who are actually, who should bear some responsibility for allowing this to happen in our country over and over and over again?
Well, Wolf, we've been hearing this since Sandy Hook. You know, I thought after Sandy Hook with the murder of 20 children that maybe people would sing a different tune. It's nonsense. It's utter nonsense. And you know what, Senator Cruz? Yes, we're politicizing this. Politics are how we get things done in this country. Politics is how we address Jim Crow. Politics is how we cover people with health insurance. Politics is how we keep people from driving drunk. So yes, politics will be, hopefully someday, the mechanism by which we stop the carnage that is unique to this country. And the Second Amendment arguments, which you just heard, are complete nonsense. We have lots of rights guaranteed in the Bill of Rights. None of them are absolute. We shouldn't even be having this conversation. We have a First Amendment right to freedom of expression, but you do not have a right to say certain things. The classic example being, of course, that you can't cry fire in a crowded theater. So those arguments, I can't tell you how angry they make me because they are so stupid in the context of what in this democracy, we believe that we have a democracy, but something like 90% of Americans believe that there should be universal background check. But Ted Cruz and his Republican friends say no, because I guess they know better. Many, many people believe we could do much better by things like safe storage, like requiring what we've done here in the state of Connecticut, requiring that police have the right in a very temporary way to take away the weapons, the guns of somebody who is seen to be a danger. We call it a risk warrant here in Connecticut. So we know we could fix that problem, but instead you hear this constitutional nonsense. You hear these arguments because at the end of the day, Senator Cruz and his fellow Republicans are scared. They're scared to do the right thing. They're scared because they think that the NRA or some other conservative group will call them not pure enough. So their fear perpetuates a system, a cult that requires the weekly sacrifice of our children. And how you fix that, I don't know, because this is not a legislative issue. It's not really a democratic issue because most Americans support some basic common sense, Second Amendment consistent measures. But Ted Cruz and his friends consistently say no for the stupidest of reasons. It's just beyond maddening.
Congressman Jim Himes of Connecticut, thank you.
Information tonight, heading to a recount. Next.
As I was aging, the pain in my hips was getting worse and
worse. Now this week. The most deadly was Sandy Hook in 2013, where Republicans also did the same thing. Something passed the House, so it had the public's majority support. There was a president in the White House, again reflecting a majority vote by the public, and the minority stopped this. Now, Ron Brownstein, who's a nonpartisan political analyst, noted that basically the senators voting for the background check bill represent 194 million people. Those opponents, using these obstruction tools I'm telling you about, a meager 118 million. Most people already supported the expanded background checks, and now, as this explodes across our life and culture, even more people are concerned about acting. The Senate is being held hostage by minority rule. And remember, the result is kids in more danger. And we live in a society where kids don't get to vote. Those kids in Texas don't have a vote on this, on what we, the adults and parents of society, do. They don't get to elect their members of Congress. The first graders at Sandy Hook didn't either. These are school children we're talking about. If we, as a society, if our lawmakers can't protect them, if we can't make it so that the majority rules on matters of public safety involving children, who will?
When are we going to do something? I'm tired. I'm so tired of getting up here and offering condolences to the devastated families that are out there. I'm so tired of the, I'm sorry. I'm tired of the moments of silence. Enough. There's 50 senators right now who refuse to vote on H.R. 8, which is a background check rule that the House passed a couple of years ago. It's been sitting there for 2 years. And there's a reason they won't vote on it, to hold on to power.
We mentioned Sandy Hook, and now we turn to Marianne Jacob, a library clerk at Sandy Hook Elementary School in Connecticut, who survived a 2012 school shooting there. She barricaded herself and a class of 18 students and barricaded a door. I'm sorry you have to do this, but we are trying to talk to people who've been through some of this, so I appreciate you joining me tonight.
Thank you for having me.
Your reaction to what we just walked through?
It's no surprise. We've been watching it for the last 10 years unfold the same way over and over again. So, my reaction is sort of the continued disgust of someone who doesn't think our elected leaders are acting on the behalf of the people they represent. But, in addition to that, I think all of us are just as accountable because we're not holding them accountable. Every single person today in our country is outraged by what happened, but 99% of them are just, what I would call slacktivists, sitting back and, just being outraged. And if we all
A Texas community in mourning as the governor says the gunman warned of his plan a half hour before the attack. Tonight, the fast-moving development in the investigation and the remaining questions tonight, including what was the shooter's motive? The desperate search for answers, parents forced to wait hours, dropping their kids off in the morning, later giving DNA samples to identify loved ones. Remembering the victims, treasuring the memories of the 19 innocent children and 2 teachers killed in yet another mass shooting in America. Gun violence epidemic, the staggering numbers of deaths and school shootings in the years since Columbine. Plus, a debate on gun legislation in the age of partisan gridlock. And anguish in America. We speak with Angel Garza after the loss of his 10-year-old daughter, A-Marie.
I just want my baby back.
This is the CBS Evening News with Norah O'Donnell, reporting tonight from Uvalde, Texas.
Good evening on what is really anything but a good evening, and thank you for joining us. I'm Tony DeCopel, in for Nora, who's recovering from COVID, and tonight we are here in Uvalde, Texas, a community shattered by one of the deadliest school shootings in American history. 21 victims, 19 of them innocent children. They ranged in age from 10 down to as young as 8. One victim described by family as the sweetest little boy I've ever known, so full of life. Others loved baseball, they loved swimming, loved dancing to TikTok videos. In other words, these are your everyday American kids, extraordinarily loved and now extraordinarily missed. Their parents tonight adjusting to a new reality, to lives that we all know will never quite be the same. And now this roughly 15,000 person, predominantly Latino community is also added to the list of places you know by heart: Columbine, Newtown, Parkland, places scarred by gun violence, their children murdered in their own classrooms. And of course, the question tonight, when will it stop? We have a lot of news to get to. We're going to begin with CBS's Janet Shamlian, who's here to start us off. Janet, good evening.
Tony, good evening to you. New details emerging tonight on how this massacre unfolded, and they are chilling. The gunman firing on a classroom full of 4th graders and their teachers. They had just been celebrating the end of the school year, but suddenly they were trapped with nowhere to go.
Massacre in a 4th grade classroom just 2 days before summer break. A gunman bursting into a 4th grade classroom at Robb Elementary School, opening fire with an AR-15 style rifle. An unimaginable toll: 19 children gunned down, along with 2 teachers. 17 others were hurt. They were kids. Among those who did not come home, A-Marie Jo Garza, who proudly displayed her honor roll certificate, and Annabelle Rodriguez, a straight-A student who loves school, and teachers Irma Garcia and Eva Morales, married to a Uvalde police officer.
These kids will never attend school again. To say the least, Uvalde has been shaken to its core.
In the aftermath, chaos and confusion as moms and dads raced to a reunion center. Far too many would go home without their children. Parents were asked to give DNA swabs to help identify the dead.
To all the moms that lost their babies, I am so sorry. I cannot imagine what they're going through.
CBS News has learned the gunman, Salvador Ramos, had earlier fought with his grandmother over a cell phone bill and shot her in the face. Tonight, she's in critical condition. Governor Greg Abbott says the shooter posted on Facebook about 30 minutes before reaching the school.
The first post was, he said, "I'm going to shoot my grandmother." The second post was, "I shot my grandmother." The third post was, "I'm going to shoot an elementary school."
The 18-year-old left in his grandmother's truck, crashing into a ditch near the school. This video shows him entering a back door just before noon, going down hallways before barricading himself in a classroom. A Border Patrol agent from an elite SWAT unit shot and killed him a short time later.
This shooter is an evil person, you know, just to go into the school and have no regard for human life and just shoot innocent children inside that classroom. It's just unimaginable to put into words right now.
The gunman dropped out of school and had few friends, authorities say, leading purchasing 2 assault rifles and almost 400 rounds of ammunition earlier this month. Uvalde resident Maria Flores told us she knows the family.
I've been hearing that he was being bullied since he was a little boy, you know. But we don't know really exactly why this thing happened.
Churches and community centers have opened their doors, but tonight, many of those prayers for the lives of children seem to have gone unanswered.
You never thought it was going to happen into your town. It's so heartbreaking.
Janet, a lot of powerful reporting now on the how of this, but are we learning more also about the why?
So beyond the reported fight with his grandmother, they say he has no criminal history, no documented issues of mental illness, so they are still looking. The FBI spending considerable time at his home today.
And I think that will continue until they get to the bottom of it. Janet, thank you very much. Earlier today, we met a man named Angel Garza, whose 10-year-old daughter, A-Marie, was killed just hours after receiving a certificate she was quite proud of for making the honor roll.
No, come here.
Angel Garza, A-Marie, was just 2 weeks past her 10th birthday when he walked this path on Tuesday, dropping her off at school for what turned out to be the very last time.
She was the sweetest thing, dude. She's so creative. She just got an award for being the most creative. I'm a 4th grader also. I don't know what to do, man. She didn't deserve that. No. She didn't. Oh, she didn't. I just want to protect my little girl.
It was her 4th grade classroom where that 18-year-old gunman opened fire, killing A-Marie at the very moment her classmates say she was calling for help.
She tried to grab her phone and call the cops.
And as we spoke, we heard a sound from inside the house. A-Marie's mother sobbing.
I hear someone crying inside. That's her mother.
Neither parent is sure what to tell her 3-year-old brother, Zane.
Every morning he wakes up, he asks for his sister.
And Garza says it's just too painful for the family to stay where they are in an area so full of memories.
She always makes me laugh because, I mean, I love music and I listen to music all the time, but every time we pulled up to that school and they're about to open her door, she makes sure to turn it down all the way because she gets embarrassed.
And while some parents find solace in the hope for change, Angel Garza is not one of them, at least not now.
Nothing's gonna change. I mean, this always happens in a small town. Nobody expects anything bad to happen, and then it happens, and everybody wants to make changes to prevent it from happening, and then it dies down a little bit, and then it happens again, and then it's a cycle. I just want my baby home. I don't care. I don't care about anything else. I don't care about nothing at all. I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry.
And to think that's one parent, one family, and there are 18 others tonight. Angel told us he wants to talk to those at the school. He's hoping to learn more about his daughter's final moments. And we also want to talk about the other lives lost, those families shattered by this horrific attack. While investigators are looking into the 8-year-old gunman's background, while they are looking for a motive, of course, we can never forget the victims, and this community certainly won't. Those 19 innocent children, their 2 dedicated teachers. Here's CBS's Lilia Luciano.
Among the victims, Xavier Lopez, whose mother came to see him just hours before during the school awards ceremony. His family describing him as full of life and posting on social media to fly high, handsome angel.
Hey guys.
Eli Garcia was a proud member of the Tree City basketball team. Her aunt described her as a sweet girl.
She was very happy and very outgoing. Loved to dance and sing and play sports.
A sign of just how small Uvalde is. At least 2 of those killed, J.C. Luevanos and Jayla Silguero, were cousins. And Irma Garcia, one of 2 4th-grade teachers there Tuesday, is being hailed as a hero. She was reportedly seen shielding kids from the shooter. Still, with every tragedy, there are stories of survival.
We were scared, and the teacher started telling us we can pray.
2nd grader Timothy Silva was in the classroom next door and said his teacher reacted quickly.
She started yelling, and I didn't think it was a drill because they would have announced it. And a teacher just went out there and started banging on our door to go hide.
His mom waited 40 agonizing minutes to know he was safe.
I was thinking that the shooter was shooting everywhere, that it was going to go through one of the walls and shoot him, and I was so scared.
As the people of Uvalde come to terms with what happened, this largely Latino community is turning to each other for comfort and to prayer, hoping to find an answer to what may never be known.
I think there are no words for this kind of situation, and we're trying to speak with our action, with our presence, with our support, with our prayer. We're ready to immediately assist them.
Old, and Jayla Nicole Seguro, 11. They were cousins too. The family telling us they were nothing but loving baby angels, always had a smile on their face, just full of life. Uzia Garcia, his grandfather, saying he was the sweetest little boy that I've ever known. And tonight here, the teachers. Irma Garcia, it was her 23rd year teaching at the school, about to celebrate her 25th wedding anniversary with her husband. She taught the children with 4th grade teacher Eva Morales. At the school for 17 years, she loved hiking in the outdoors, and her students loved her. Tonight, the growing memorial outside the school here, the flowers on the school sign, the officers just off behind it. And that father who showed me his daughter fishing with him, and his vow tonight to always honor her.
We have to honor her and make sure that we do good, and you know, and from this day forward, I want to live my life for my daughter that can't be here to live hers. You know, I want to try to do as much as I can, the best I can, as you know, as positive as I can, and I just would want to do what Amory would make her happy. You know, just live my life how she would want me to live it, and how just to do her proud. You know, do her proud, and just live the life that she can't live anymore. You know.
That's your purpose now.
That's my purpose now.
The father determined to honor his daughter. The parents here, the families here that must now somehow find a way forward without their children. This community is a small, proud community, tight-knit, and we have learned tonight that among the law enforcement taking down the suspect inside the school here, a deputy sheriff who lost their own child. ABC's Maria Villarreal right here in Uvalde.
Tonight, as the tight-knit town of Uvalde mourns and grieves, we're learning that for many of the responding officers, this was personal. Many had their own children in harm's way. The sheriff's department.
One deputy sheriff lost a daughter in that school.
And Border Patrol.
We had one agent that lost his granddaughter. We had others that lost extended family.
Border Patrol Sector Chief Jason Owens telling me more than 80 agents responded to the scene.
They put themselves between this crazy person and these innocent children. Whether they were pulling the children to safety from windows, whether they were clearing rooms, whether they were actively engaging that suspect, each and every person played their role, and they did it with all of their heart.
Families taken to the local civic center, giving samples of their DNA, waiting for hours for officials to confirm whether or not their child had died. A long and painful process in a small town where there's less than 10 physicians available to deal with this kind of tragedy. All of the patients treated here have been released, so a bit of good news. And the 6 transferred to San Antonio, only 1 is still in critical condition. David?
Maria Villarreal right here on the scene with us again tonight. Maria, thank you. We turn now to the investigation tracking Salvador Ramos's final steps, the purchase of those assault-style weapons right after turning 18 just days ago. And tonight here, Matt Gutman interviews the suspect's grandfather, who says the family had no idea he had those weapons.
Tonight, investigators say the suspected Texas elementary school shooter bought those 2 AR-style rifles on 2 separate days. The first one on May 17th, just a day after his 18th birthday, and the other 3 days later on May 20th. Both rifles purchased just days before the rampage at Oasis Outback, a local sporting goods store. Authorities say the 18-year-old suspect legally purchased those ARs without a license, as well as multiple 30-bullet magazines and at least 375 rounds. The sale of large-capacity magazines and bullets is not regulated in Texas. Earlier, officials said the gunman was wearing body armor, but now correcting themselves, saying it was tactical gear, a vest designed to carry ammunition, but not protective plates or fabric. His grandfather telling me he knew nothing about the weapons.
I didn't know he had weapons or nothing or this or that there. If I would have known, I would have reported him.
You would have reported your own grandson?
Yes, because I'm against all that.
Tonight, Texas Governor Greg Abbott saying the suspect had no known mental health history, insisting that law enforcement had no warnings.
There was no meaningful forewarning of this crime.
Tonight, investigators are combing through the suspect's social media history, where he allegedly posted videos of himself abusing animals, as well as photos of guns. His classmate Nathan Romo telling me the suspect had stalked him, even threatened to kill him after he ended their friendship.
In the back of your head, did you think, well, if there was anybody at school who would have done that, it's this kid?
Yeah, honestly, yeah.
So there were warning signs?
A little bit.
David, investigators tell me they still have to get through hundreds of interviews. This is going to take days. In the meantime, they have a number of outstanding questions, like for how long had the suspect planned this attack? What precipitated it? How did he get proficiency in the use of those weapons? Who knew about them? And who might have been able to put a stop to this? David.
So many questions. Matt Gutman here in Texas with us as well. Thank you, Matt. We turn now to the call to act tonight across this country, echoing from Texas to Washington, D.C. Here in Texas today, Governor Greg Abbott was confronted on live TV during his briefing. His Democratic challenger, Beto O'Rourke, interrupting him not long after the governor said he had asked so many leaders here on the ground what went wrong. Tonight, President Biden asking lawmakers, where is our backbone? Rachel Scott on the Hill tonight.
Republican Texas Governor Greg Abbott insisting today that guns were not the problem in the mass shooting that killed 19 children and 2 teachers.
I asked the sheriff and others and open-ended question, what is the problem here? And they were straightforward and emphatic. They said, we have a problem with mental health illness in this community.
But interrupting Abbott's press conference, former Democratic Congressman Beto O'Rourke, who's running for governor himself.
You are doing nothing. No. You're offering us nothing. You said this is not predictable. This is totally predictable when you choose not to do anything. Sir, you are out.
O'Rourke escorted out.
This is on you until you choose to do something different. This will continue to happen.
In Washington, Senator Chris Murphy of Connecticut, where 26 people, including 20 children, were gunned down at Sandy Hook Elementary School, challenging his Republican colleagues to act.
What are we doing? Why are you here? If not to solve a problem as existential as this.
Polls show the American people want change. 56% support an assault weapons ban. 86% support a red flag law, allowing authorities to temporarily take guns away from people determined to be dangerous. And 89% support background checks. Still, for most Republicans on Capitol Hill, those issues are non-starters.
The majority of Americans support expanded background checks. Why not support it?
Unfortunately, what some people do is immediately want to take people's Second Amendment rights away, and I'm not willing to do that.
Many Republicans didn't want to talk about the issue at all.
Do you support expanded background checks? The majority of Americans support it. Do you support it? The majority of Americans support background checks. Do you support it?
Democrat Joe Manchin and Republican Pat Toomey have proposed a bill to expand background checks, including for sales online and at gun shows. But it needs 60 votes to pass, unless Senate Democrats change the rules to pass it with a simple majority. Senator Kyrsten Sinema of Arizona won't do that.
Senator Sinema, do you support changing the Senate rules in order to pass gun control legislation? 19 children are dead.
Thanks so much.
Can you give us a comment about it? In 2018, Texas Governor Greg Abbott did ask state lawmakers to consider a red flag law, but when Republicans refused, he backed down. And since then, Texas has actually loosened its gun laws, David.
Rachel Scott live in Washington tonight. Rachel, thank you. And there was a moment last night after news of the school shooting. NBA coach Steve Kerr of the Golden State Warriors in Dallas for a playoff game, the normal news conference. But then he came out and said he wasn't going to talk about basketball.
Now we have children murdered at school. When are we going to do something? And 50 senators in Washington are going to hold us hostage. Do you realize that 90% of Americans, regardless of political party, want background check, universal background check? 90% of us, we are being held hostage by 50 senators in Washington who refuse to even put it to a vote, despite what we, the American people, want. They won't vote on it because they want to hold on to their own power. It's pathetic. I've had enough.
Steve Kerr, a longtime gun control advocate, lost his father in a terror attack in the Middle East in 1984. When we come back tonight from Texas, what we are just learning from the White House, President Biden and the First Lady and their plans now to come to Texas.
Before treating your friends, number two, get yourselves back in the gym. Have better self-care. Take care of your body through diet, through proper sleep, through elements of nature. And number three, it's always good to have a sense of spirit or faith or religion to be attached to. It doesn't mean that the scientifically minded among us should not necessarily abandon that, but sometimes a faith and spirit can really help us when we have no concrete logical answers.
Dr. Norman Fried with tools and resources that we can use. Thank you so much for your time.
A pleasure. Thank you.
Well, today does mark 2 years since George Floyd's death. A new executive order President Biden signed geared toward law enforcement and how it's designed to hold officers accountable.
News Nation Rush Hour in association.
A lot of energy throughout the whole day. So I tell my patients, Balance of Nature is a wonderful product, and I really feel that people would benefit from taking this product. Very happy with it.
Even my doctor.
Taylor, Fasenra is an add-on treatment for asthma driven by
out the state this coming weekend.
And as students get ready for summer break, a new survey from Wallet Hub ranks 2 South Dakota cities among the best places for summer jobs. The survey looked at metrics such as the youth job market and affordability across more than 180 cities. Rapid City ranked 8th overall, and Sioux Falls was 31st. Sioux Falls ranked 5th in the areas of labor participation and unemployment rate for people ages 16 to 24. Des Moines and Minneapolis were also in the top 50 overall.
You know, I mean, it is horrific, and it doesn't get any less so. If anything, there's the dread, the sickening sense that this will likely happen again. And it seems that there is, at this stage, not enough of a consensus from anyone about what can be done, what should be done, and what will be done. But, you know, my thoughts right now are with the families who have learned last night, waited, all day long to hear the news of their children, and many of them have gotten that sickening news, and how their lives will be forever changed. And there's a lot of, obviously, grief counselors and a lot of survivors of school shootings and other parents who have lost children who are reaching out to these families in their grief, and we'll talk to some of them tonight. But it is just, it is an unthinkable tragedy for these families, and this is a community obviously stung.
Yes, it's so heartbreaking. Anderson Cooper, thank you so much for being on the scene for us. And to our viewers, be sure to watch Anderson Cooper 360 later tonight, 8 p.m. Eastern, for Anderson's special live coverage from the scene. Just ahead, the NBA coach Steve Kerr sounds off on the Texas school massacre, making an impassioned plea for gun reform after yet another bloody mass murder here in America.
So, are you excited?
I am, but I'm a little nervous. This feels like a big change.
But it's not. I have one. People act like they're so hard to take care of or whatever, but it's totally a piece of cake.
Well, that's good to hear.
See how easy that is?
Never been more affordable.
Teachers who taught 4th grade. A relative recounts that Morales died protecting her students.
She did love what she did at the school, and she put her heart into everything that she did. She is a hero.
Javier Lopez's mother was with him during an awards ceremony. This was just hours before the shooting. One of our guests referenced this earlier today. Many say that he was like the life of the party. He danced memorably with his family and cheered people up. Amarillo Garcia was the one who called 911. You can see this photo. This was just taken hours before when she was celebrated for making the honor roll. Eliana Cruz Torres' family described her as a beautiful girl who was full of energy. Annabelle Guadalupe Rodriguez was given an award for music also that very morning. You can see how their day started. Zia Garcia was described by his grandfather as the sweetest little boy. It's a community in mourning tonight, also praying for change. We'll be right back.
Plastics, retina. We're so embarrassed we overpaid for.
That's why I'm here. Have you had blackberry before? No, man.
Washington, D.C. Today, President Biden signing an executive order aimed at reforming policing in America. It's a job Congress tried but failed to complete. As Raquel Martin explains, the new order is aimed at holding law enforcement more accountable.
The president's executive order comes on the 2-year anniversary of George Floyd's death and following historic calls for reform. Wednesday, President Joe Biden signed an executive order to reform policing practices nationwide.
This executive order is going to deliver the most significant police reform in decades.
The action comes on the 2-year anniversary of the death of George Floyd. Floyd's family was among a group of victim families who attended the signing.
As divided as this nation can feel, today we're showing the strength of our unity.
The president's executive order would do things like create a national database to track police misconduct and restrict the use of chokeholds and no-knock warrants. It also mandates body-worn cameras, but the majority of the order only applies to federal officers.
No substitute for legislation, but it is a necessary and long overdue critical step forward.
And he's doing the right thing.
Ohio Democrat Joyce Beatty, the chair of the Congressional Black Caucus, applauded the president's effort.
We've lost too many lives, and this is a step of great progress.
And Texas Democrat Sheila Jackson Lee says Democrats will continue to push for more reforms on Capitol Hill.
We will not ignore you.
Widespread reform will require bipartisan support in the Senate. But when asked about the president's efforts, Missouri Republican Senator Josh Hawley said he thinks President Biden's priorities are misplaced.
I think that we ought to be helping local law enforcement hire more cops. I'd like to see 100,000 new cops. We need it.
The executive order also requires federal law enforcement agencies to improve their hiring process to ensure bad actors don't slip through the cracks. It'll also instruct the Department of Justice and Health and Human Services to improve wellness programs to help prevent police suicide. For now in Washington, Raquel Martin, back to you, Nicole.
All right, here's a look at some other stories we are following in our Rush Hour Rundown right now. And with Russia's invasion of Ukraine now in its 4th month and facing heavy losses, the Russian parliament lifted the upper age limit on military service. President Vladimir Putin has yet to sign off on the change, but the current age limit for joining the Russian military is 40. China says it has conducted military exercises near Taiwan as a warning to the U.S. That disclosure coming just 2 days after President Biden said the U.S. would defend Taiwan militarily should China invade. The White House has sought to downplay the president's remarks, saying U.S. policy toward Taiwan has not changed. And today does mark 2 years since George Floyd's death and President Biden signing an executive order on policing, a bulk of the order focusing on federal law enforcement agencies, reviewing and revising use of force policies. That order also authorizes the use of a database to help track officer misconduct. The order also restricts the flow of surplus military equipment to local police. And one of Johnny Depp's ex-girlfriends testifying in court today that Depp never pushed her down the steps, despite Amber Heard's claims that he did. Kate Boss testified virtually that she slipped and fell down the steps while the two were vacationing in Jamaica back in the 90s, saying, quote, "He never pushed me." After more than a month, closing arguments are scheduled for Friday in Depp's defamation trial against ex-wife Amber Heard. And a federal judge has sentenced Josh Duggar from the TLC show 19 Kids and Counting to 12.5 years in
from that, but we're not even close to that right now.
We're like one election away from solving the big things. Panel, I'm sorry, we got to wrap up. You know, Kellyanne speaks a lot. No, I'm just kidding. All right, thank you so much. We'll be back tomorrow. Special report, the Hillary Clinton campaign lawyer accused of lying to the FBI may take the state.
Sorry.
Get 1.75% APR on 5 of Toyota's hybrids plus 7 of Toyota's fuel-efficient gas models.
Your summer starts here.
Toyota, let's go places.
Tonight, a special one-hour edition of Nightly News from Uvalde, Texas, site of a horrific elementary school massacre. The small town in shock. 19 children and 2 teachers gunned down in the same classroom. The chilling new details, the warnings the 18-year-old suspect posted on Facebook just minutes before the rampage. Police saying he shot his grandmother, crashed a truck, then entered the school, barricading himself inside a classroom and opening fire with an AR-15 style rifle. The terrifying moments. Did you hear the shooting?
2 times, yes. But then they sounded like bangs, but then our teacher kept saying, no, they're just fireworks.
A tactical team arriving, breaching the door and killing him at the scene. The growing questions, what was the motive? Also tonight, the victims, many just 10 years old or younger. One girl shot while calling 911. 2 cousins among the dead. The teacher killed while shielding her students. What we're learning about the lives lost and the stunning moment.
The next shooting is right now, and you are doing nothing.
Texas Republican Governor Greg Abbott's news conference on the shooting interrupted by Beto O'Rourke, the Democrat challenging his re-election bid. O'Rourke escorted out of the room. President Biden today doubling down on demands for tighter gun laws. Will Congress take action? Our team in Uvalde with complete coverage of this Texas tragedy.
This is NBC Nightly News with Lester Holt, reporting tonight from Uvalde, Texas.
Good evening from this city of sorrow, Uvalde, Texas, a small town that has become yet another landmark for mass murder in America. The bloodshed, the suffering we have seen so many times before. As we come on the air tonight, here's what we know. The gunman killed 19 children here and 2 teachers in yesterday's attack. All of them, we've learned, were inside a single classroom here at Robb Elementary. Police say the 18-year-old attacker barricaded himself by locking the door, then started shooting until law enforcement officers broke in and stopped him. Today, the governor said that just before the shooting, the gunman had warned online that he had shot his grandmother and was going to attack a school. He had bought 2 AR-15 semi-automatic rifles legally just days before. There is still no motive, but there may have been warning signs. Tonight, our teams are covering every part of the story. We'll hear from the president and loved ones of the victims, including one family I spoke with late today. Tonight, amid the unbearable shock and sorrow here, the disbelief that this small Texas town could be the target for this kind of horror. 19 elementary school students, 2 teachers, all gunned down on the last week of school.
I consider this person to have been pure evil.
Officials say the rampage began around 11 a.m. Tuesday when the suspect posted on Facebook he was going to shoot his 66-year-old grandmother, who he lived with inside this home. She survived, went to a neighbor to call police, while authorities say he took off in her truck, posting on Facebook, "I shot my grandmother," and around 11:15 a.m., "I'm going to shoot an elementary school." By 11:32, he was at Robb Elementary, where police say he crashed the truck.
There was a brave Consolidated Independent School District resource officer that approached him, engaged him, and at that time, gunfire was not exchanged.
The suspect was then able to go inside the school with a backpack. and an AR-15 rifle.
He went down a hallway, turned right, then turned left, and there was 2 classrooms that were adjoining. And that's where the carnage began.
Officials say he locked the door, then opened fire. This man had just brought flowers to his wife, a teacher.
The minute I got in my pickup, I heard a couple of shots, and then immediately the police were there.
The suspect was shot and killed by a responding Border Patrol officer. Police say the suspect is Salvador Ramos, who recently turned 18, the legal age to buy a gun in Texas, and had just bought his weapons. He had dropped out of Uvalde High School, was unemployed, and had no criminal history. Today, we spoke with the family of 4th grader Aurelia Santos, who was still clutching her teddy bear. Did you hear the shooting?
2 times, yes. They sounded like bangs, but then our teacher kept saying, no, they're just fireworks. So we knew they weren't fireworks, so everyone was panicking. My friend Michael, he was nearby the window and he saw, so he kept mouthing whenever the teachers were looking, someone got shot.
That's a lot of 10-year-olds to deal with. That's a lot for any of us to deal with. How are you doing today?
I'm doing better.
And you got to talk to someone today?
Yeah.
Her parents brought her in for counseling. She knew many of the victims. Aurelia knows some of those kids?
Very, very many. She's grown up with them. We're a small town.
Meanwhile, emotional scenes with parents desperate for news about their kids. As tonight we're learning more about the heartbreaking toll here. 10-year-old Amerie Jo Garza seen beaming as she was named to the honor roll during the school's awards day, just hours before she was gunned down in her classroom. Her grandmother said she was shot as she was calling 911. Among the other victims identified tonight, Annabelle Rodriguez, Eliana Torres, Jose Flores, Javier Lopez, Rogelio Torres, Uzia Garcia, Lexi Rubio, Ellie Garcia, Jacqueline Cesares, Jace Luevanos, and Hyla Seguero, and teachers Irma Garcia and Eva Mireles, a 17-year veteran of Uvalde schools.
I've worked for this district for 30 years and never thought I would be sitting in front of you doing this today. But please pray for our teachers, pray for our community, and we will move forward.
There are new details tonight about the gunman and his background from law enforcement officials and from some of those who knew him. Our Tom Yamas has late details.
Tonight, we're learning more about 18-year-old gunman Salvador Ramos. He grew up in the same town he tore apart, alongside the families whose children he murdered during Tuesday's senseless massacre.
Anyone who shoots his grandmother in the face has to have evil in his heart. But it is far more evil for someone to gun down little kids.
People who knew the shooter describe him as a loner in this small community of about 15,000 people.
Nobody knew him. Nobody was there with him.
He dropped out of a local high school and had worked at a fast food restaurant. He posted photos of guns on social media, but law enforcement says he has no known criminal history and no record of mental illness. Until recently, the shooter lived with his mother and her boyfriend, Juan Manuel Alvarez.
I didn't know he could be capable of doing something like that. It's hard, man.
Alvarez says the gunman was bullied as a child, would often keep to himself, and avoided conversation. He says 2 months ago the teen moved out after getting into a fight with his mother over the Wi-Fi. That's when he moved into this house with his grandparents. His grandfather spoke with reporters today.
Could you give us any insight into his state of mind? When's the last time you spoke to him?
I speak to him daily, but...
You know he had guns in the house?
No? I didn't know.
Those guns were 2 AR-15 rifles, legally purchased shortly after he turned 18. He used one in Tuesday's horrific shooting. The other was found on the ground outside of his grandmother's truck, which he had crashed in a ditch near the school. His family members say they never thought he could do this. I spoke with his Aunt Shelby, who was in disbelief.
Do you have any idea why he flipped?
See, everybody has their own, like I said, their own perspective of everything going on. Nobody knows what everybody holds. Everybody holds things inside. People go through things and nobody understands.
She says she has no idea why he targeted this elementary school.
This shouldn't have happened like this, and I'm sorry to all the families. Like, my heart aches. I have babies. My son goes to the same school. Like, my heart hurts for everyone right now.
Tom, joining us now, you filled in a lot of blanks there, but does anything get us closer to the answer of why, what the motive was?
So, Lester, today we learned the how. The gunman is dead. We may never learn the why. The governor called him a demented person. His family says they never saw this coming. One thing is clear. This man's mind or his heart was poisoned with evil.
All right, Tom Yamas, thank you for that. They were all looking forward to the summer break coming at the end of this week. Children with their whole lives ahead of them, and veteran teachers loved by their students. Morgan Chesky has some of their stories tonight.
Tonight, they are the faces breaking hearts nationwide and bringing the small town of Uvalde to its knees. 19 children now identified and 2 beloved teachers gunned down in an elementary school. Authorities confirming all of them were inside a single classroom, led by Irma Garcia and Ava Morales.
Just to handle the load. But look, at the end of the day, they know the world is watching. They know the questions outside will resonate here. Judy, 19 children are dead. 19 9- and 10-year-olds started their day like any other in what should have been their last week of school, and they were murdered in their classroom, and there's just no making sense of that because it should not happen. This is a uniquely American problem, and Uvalde is now the latest community to feel this kind of pain. Judy.
It is just impossible to understand. Amna, thank you very much. As we've been hearing, this shooting in Texas has renewed calls for more gun regulations, but Congress remains gridlocked on the issue. Democratic Senator Chris Murphy represents the state of Connecticut, where the deadliest elementary school shooting in American history happened in 2012. And Senator Murphy joins us now from Capitol Hill. Senator, thank you for being here. You stood on the Senate floor yesterday and you said to your fellow senators, and I'm just quoting, "What are we doing?" You said, "Why are we spending all this time running for the Senate if your answer is, as the slaughter increases, we do nothing?" Have you heard any answers from your fellow senators?
You know, this is a moment that compels us to action. I mean, my question was sincere. I don't understand why you spend all this time trying to be a member of the world's greatest deliberative body if you're just going to sit back and let this slaughter continue without answer. I've been engaged all day today in conversations with Republicans and Democrats trying to see if we can find some common ground. I understand Republicans aren't going to support everything that I support. We probably can't get a universal background check bill. We probably can't get the votes for a ban on assault weapons. But maybe we can do some smaller things to at least show parents and kids in this country that we take seriously the fear, the anxiousness that they labor under every single day in their classrooms and at home. Senator Schumer has said that he'll give us about a week to 10 days to try to work out that compromise, but then he's going to bring votes before the Senate, either a compromise that we work on and put before the body, or something very much like what has passed the House of Representatives, expanded background checks in this nation. I think he's right. Let's have some space for debate, for discussions, negotiations, but ultimately we need to have a debate and take some votes.
So what kinds of smaller things do you think are possible? And just remind us again, why can't bigger things get done?
Well, you know, we have 50 votes in the Senate for expanded background checks. That's the clearest intervention that would reduce the pace of gun murder in this country. Remember, we pay attention when these mass shootings happen, and they are cataclysmic. But every single day, more people are dying from guns than at any time in the last several decades. We've had a huge surge in gun violence in our cities, in our rural areas in the last several years. So we have the majority of senators who support things like universal background checks. We just don't have 60 senators, which is what is required under the rules. So we need to find 10 Republicans that will support any of these interventions. So what are we talking about? We're talking about some minor expansions of background checks, getting more sales through the background check system. We're talking about red flag laws. These are the laws that allow you to take weapons away from people who are showing signs of breaks with reality or showing signs of future violence. those are the kind of things that we might be able to find 60 votes on, but we'll see. We're going to work at it in the next several days.
But you're saying at this point you don't even know that you could get the votes for one of these, as you describe them, smaller things.
I don't. I mean, the problem is that the gun industry has had such a grip on the Republican Party here in Congress that it's hard to break. But sometimes when these particularly cataclysmic shootings happen, enough Republicans are willing to enter into discussions that we can get a breakthrough. I don't know if this is one of those moments, but I'm going to try really hard in the next coming days to find that compromise.
Are you sensing any movement on the part of your Republican colleagues?
I don't know yet. I mean, I've been in conversations all today. I don't know that I've seen any of my Republican colleagues have an epiphany, but there's a willingness to sit down and talk. And, that's my job, right? I went to the floor last night and, told my colleagues that they weren't doing their job if they weren't prepared to be engaged in conversation about fixing this problem. So I'm going to meet them where they are, sit down and talk about some changes we can make to background checks laws, to red flag laws. But if we can't come up with a compromise, then we just have to take some votes and show the American people where their senators stand.
Are you putting any energy, Senator, into trying to change the filibuster rule, or is it just, I mean, we know there's been opposition from Senator Manchin of West Virginia, Senator Sinema of Arizona. Any sense of movement on their part?
No, I don't have any sense that that is going to change. I think right now we have to deal with the rules as they exist. That requires us to get 60 votes. But you can see why people are kind of giving up on democracy across the country. The American people did everything we asked of them. They elected to Congress a majority in the House, a majority in the Senate, and a president who all supports universal background checks, which would undoubtedly dramatically stem the number of murders in this country. And even having gone through that exercise of electing majorities in the House, Senate, president who believes in changing the gun laws, they still can't get it done because of this requirement in the Senate of a super majority. And so you can see the American public, has a right to be very frustrated with Washington right now when they do their job, but the rules prevent us from enacting their will.
Senator,
kind of a concept I've heard people talk about, relaxing.
Benefit. And I don't think that people in these communities appreciate that very much because they're still grieving right now. Do we need to find out what went wrong? Absolutely. How did he get it in the building? How did this go on for so long? I mean, I covered Parkland in Florida. Schools are locked down. There's a school resource officer in pretty much every school that's armed. What was going on here? They're going to have to answer those questions. I don't think they're ready yet, Lee.
No, they certainly aren't. In terms of the policies, even for as much as we know at this point about what happened inside the building, some of the great reporting you, Robert Sherman, Ali Bradley have been doing, we still don't really know what policies would have prevented what happened here in terms of how things go. Brian, incredible work. We'll be back with you in a couple of minutes. Looking forward in terms of what we have, the president announced today that he is going to come here to Uvalde. We don't know what day that will be. Certainly yesterday, the president struck two very different notes in his speeches. One, that of the consoler and comforter in chief, the only president of modern times and in modern school shootings who has lost a child himself. And the emotion that he brought during part of his speech yesterday was simply extraordinary. The politics of this and the message the president will bring here to Uvalde when we come back.
Won't believe your eyes.
Mass murder in Texas, fallout from the elementary school shooting, and what happens next. For up-to-the-minute reports, stay with Fox News Channel for continuing coverage.
Market.
Right.
But I would tell those families, right now, your world is spinning. It's about getting through the seconds and the minutes. It's not about looking ahead a month from now, a week from now. Get through today. You have a funeral to plan. You have law enforcement issues to deal with, and you have children who need you, and you will need your children.
Yeah.
And so focus on the now. I will be there for you later.
And I have one last question, because you mentioned your son.
because a lot of people forget that the trauma that the parents are experiencing is double in a sense for the siblings who you're missing another part. And it has to be, it has to be explained to you where your sister or brother is, and your parents have to be in this mode of trying to cope and do all of it. And then you're still there and needing care. Can you just give some advice on how to care for the children who are still in the home and alive?
Absolutely. And in my son's case, and in so many other cases, my son was there too. Yeah. My son heard the bullets that were killing his sister. And so it is a real issue. People think, gun violence is only about those we bury. No, it's all the collateral damage. It is the kids who have PTSD, the community that is traumatized. And so, listen, it is such a great question. I would just say this. This is a moment where a community comes together and makes sure families are supported.
Yeah.
But my life now is all about my son and making sure he's okay. I joke all the time that when he was in school, I always used to have my foot up his you-know-what because I expected a lot of things of him.
Yeah.
After the shooting, I just need him to be okay.
Yeah. Yeah, and I know I have talked to Sabrina Fulton about this, is also finding that moment when you can let them go to the store, and let them go around the corner by themselves. It changes the way you parent.
We have to move forward.
Yeah. Fred Guttenberg, you're a great man. You're brave, and I don't think I can do what you're doing. I really don't. I can barely read through the biographies of these children, so I couldn't do what you do. So thank you. Thank you for being here, and thank you for what you do. All right. Thank you, man.
I appreciate you.
I appreciate you much more. Up next on the Readout, before these victims are even laid to rest, the NRA is planning to throw their big party in Texas this weekend. 2 candidates for Congress who are fighting everything the NRA stands for will join me next. Plus,
when are we going to do something? I'm tired. I'm so tired of getting up here and offering condolences to the devastated families that are out there.
Golden State Warriors coach Steve Kerr says what we are all thinking. The Readout continues after this.
Derriere just come. Factors. Marco Rubio is a senator from Florida who joins us now. So, Senator, what do you think's in play here? Because it just can't be all about guns. It's got to be something else.
Yeah, I mean, I think the intro to this actually touches upon it. It's not about the how necessarily, but the why, in the sense that these are people that want to harm people in a mass scale, and the instrument they use in many cases are guns, but that sentiment of wanting to hurt people is the one we really need to really focus on. I don't know if there's a blanket for every single one of these. I certainly am not a psychologist or a sociologist, but I've read a lot about these things because I want to become informed. The one thing I can tell you is we do have tools available now for risk assessment. It's one of the ways the Secret Service protects presidents. It's not so much about the physical protection alone, is that they are able to profile and identify people that they believe pose a threat to a president or a leader, and are able to go to them and prevent them from acting. And that same system that is able to identify that risk assessment protocols exist for things like mass shooting. And then the question becomes, can you have tools in place to identify and intervene before people take that next step? And oftentimes that's difficult to do because in the case of a school, for example, we've built up a culture in many places where we don't want to criminalize 16 and 17-year-olds. We don't want law enforcement hanging around the school campus and sort of stigmatizing people. But in many of these shootings, I mean, Las Vegas being one of the exceptions, a guy that really still don't know too much about the motivation behind that terrible tragedy. But these others are people that didn't just snap from one moment to the next. We'll learn more about this murderer, but we know about the one in Florida, we know about the one in other places, and these are people that for a period of time were headed in this direction, and there was nothing in place to catch it and stop it from happening before it got to that point.
That's interesting, your Secret Service analogy, because you're right. They send these letters or they make these threats, and then the Secret Service will pay them a visit. They'll knock on the door and they'll say, "Hey, Mike, what's going on? How you feeling?" And then even when the president goes into that city, they have a whole list of people that they go check on. You're not going to go anywhere near the event, are you? You're not supposed to. And how would that look in school? And is this something that you've tried to bring up in legislation? And have the Democrats agreed with that?
Well, we have, and actually there are programs in place that fund that, and we were able to do that and continue to fund it every year since. We led that effort after Parkland. And it has to be multidisciplinary, right? You have to have input from all kinds of places. So it might be a law enforcement interaction combined with what a school counselor or a teacher is seeing, combined with what a family member or a parent is reporting. And then all of these things come into a central location as opposed to being bifurcated from each other. It's a really useful tool, and it's one that we should use more because, unfortunately, there's someone out there right now that's going to be the next school shooter because they're watching this stuff on TV, and it's going to inspire them to act. It's a terrible thing.
I think you're right. You create a little threat matrix for a school district that identifies people based on a number of factors, and then you're more aware. I think that's really smart, and I'd like to see that. Thank you so much for coming on Prime Time, and thanks for everything you're doing for the state of Florida and for the nation. Thank you.
Thank you.
Let's turn to Congressman Tony Gonzalez, who represents Uvalde, Texas. Again, our hearts break. We're so sorry that this happened. Tell us what you're thinking and what you're feeling and what the community is feeling. And is the community doing any better than they were doing yesterday?
Yeah, thank you for having me on, Jesse. You know, I spent 20 years in the military, 5 years in Iraq and Afghanistan, and this moment reminds me a lot of war. And there's a portion of war when you're always in the red zone. You're just go, go, go. It really hasn't sunk in yet. And I think that's what the community is feeling, almost the sense of shock. And I think this will happen for a few more days, that the adrenaline will keep them going. And then after that, then the traumatic experience will settle in. And that's when this community in particular will really need the resources. I grew up in a small town 38 miles from here, 500 people in this town. Uvalde, everyone knows everyone. It's a very pro-law enforcement community, and everybody is hurting. I think you're going to see us extremely hurting here in a couple days.
All right. And is there anything that we're learning that's new about the shooter, the family dynamic? Because it seems like a really dysfunctional situation.
Yeah, no, I think you see a lot of times these shooters, they act out well before they ultimately do the final act. And we need to get ahead of that. You know, last year when I visited with the county judge here in Uvalde, who's a Democrat, and I visited with the mayor, who's a Republican, and I sat down with the sheriff, they asked me for one thing. I go, if I can give you one thing, what would that be? They go, Tony, we need a mental health facility. So that's something we've been working on. The county set aside some land, so the land's taken care of. We appropriated $2 million towards that. So I think that's the area that we need to focus on, mental health facilities.
That would be amazing if you could get an institution up pretty soon, because, God, do we need that. Thank you so much for joining us. And again, we're so sorry about what happened, and we really appreciate your leadership down there.
Thank you, Jesse.
Welcome to Davos, where the world's elites come up with the worst ideas ever. Senator Rand Paul is next.
The NRA is once again holding court near the site of a slaughter made possible by their one true love, making sure American mass shooters are the best equipped mass shooters and murderers in the world. And Republicans are lining up to bend the knee. Donald Trump, of course, confirmed he's still speaking. And the Texas Party of Death crew, Senator Ted Cruz, Governor Greg Abbott, and Lieutenant Governor Dan Patrick are scheduled. John Cornyn apparently got cold feet. I doubt it was a conscience. At a press conference featuring the trio, Abbott's Democratic opponent, Beto O'Rourke, was having none of their platitudes and feigned compassion.
Excuse me. Excuse me.
Sit down.
You're out of line and an embarrassment.
Sit down and don't play this stuff.
The next shooting is right now, and you are doing nothing.
No, he needs to get his ass out of here. This isn't the place to talk this over.
This is totally predictable when you...
Sir, you're out of line. Sir, you are out of line. Sir, you are out of line. Please leave this auditorium. I can't believe you're a sick son of a that would come to a deal like this to make a political issue.
Let's bring in NBC News correspondent Morgan Chesky in Uvalde, Texas. And Morgan, you spoke with Beto after all of that contretemps. What did he say, and what's been the reaction in Uvalde, if any?
Yeah, Joy, it really was a stunning scene. We saw Texas DPS officers running towards the high school as that exchange happened inside that gymnasium. And then Beto O'Rourke was escorted out by law enforcement officers, where we met him in a parking lot. And I did ask him the question, what do you say to Texas Governor Greg Abbott, who says now is not the time to politicize this? And O'Rourke simply said, we have seen time and time again where a shooting has happened, there is a lot of talk, and in his words, nothing was done that solved the problem. And that's why he said, if there is ever a time, now is the time. As far as any reaction in Uvalde to that specific moment, the majority of the focus here, Joy, has been placed upon just finding a way to move on. I'm at the Civic Center turned reunification site. Yesterday, this was a site of such anguish. So many families left waiting for agonizing hours to see if their young child had survived this horrific ordeal. Today, with authorities confirming they've contacted every family involved now, this has become essentially a grief center. They've had counselors inside all day long. We saw teachers from Robb Elementary School visiting here earlier today. These counselors are going to stay here for the foreseeable future to help anyone in the community. Meanwhile, every campus remains closed here, and graduation has been canceled as this investigation only deepens. Joy.
Morgan Chesky, thank you very much. Much appreciated. Pretty horrific stuff that you have to cover, and I want to thank you for doing it. Joining me now, two Democratic candidates for Congress, Daniel Hernandez of Arizona, who's currently a state representative, and Maxwell Alejandro Frost of Florida. I want to thank both of you for being here. I wonder, I'll start with you, Maxwell Alejandro Frost. I'm going to start with you. Welcome to the show. Give me what you think about this idea of not politicizing. This is a talking point that goes all the way back with the NRA, saying you don't. This is literally their talking points. The NRA, they've responded in 2007 when Virginia Tech happened. This is not a time for political discussions or public policy debates. 2012 when Sandy Hook happened. The only thing that stops a good guy with a gun is a bad guy with a gun. Parkland shooting in 2018. Evil walks among us. God help us if we don't harden our da-da-da-da-da. The Republicans in Texas talk about saying don't politicize this. They're all using those talking points in their response to the Uvalde massacre. Let's take a look.
We know from past experience that the most effective tool for keeping kids safe is armed law enforcement on the campus. You know, inevitably, when there's a murder of this kind, you see politicians try to politicize it.
Evil will always walk among us. We will continue to discuss with legislators about all the potential avenues and pathways that we can take to make sure that schools will be even safer going forward.
Check, check, and check, Maxwell Frost. They're rolling out the talking points. How ironic is it for politicians who do a press conference surrounded by other politicians saying don't politicize this and then using their talking points?
Yeah, well, the reason they don't want to talk about the politics is because they know it's bad politics, right? They know that the majority of Americans, including gun owners, are for things like universal background checks. They know that people have had enough of these shootings. And so, of course, they want to kick the can down the road. Of course, they want to yell at people like Beto, which, by the way, a huge thank you to Beto on that work. That's what we need from our leaders. And the NRA has been spewing the same talking points. You know, I've been in this fight for 10 years since the Sandy Hook shooting happened. And we hear the same thing time and time again from this organization. And, you know, my message to gun owners, too, is the NRA doesn't care about everyday gun owners. They care about everyday gun manufacturers. They're here to ensure that this industry makes money despite our children's lives being at risk. And so we have to continue to fight. And, you know, what we tell people, and we saw those stickers that came out years ago on the ID that says, if I die from gun violence, politicize my death so it never happens again. And my generation, Generation Z, we were born into drills, shooting drills, and we understand that this problem has to stop. And now is the time to talk about the politics and to talk about the solutions.
Absolutely. And Daniel Hernandez, you have a connection to one of these shootings that you know, nearly killed Gabby Gifford. Her husband, Mark Kelly, is now a United States Senator. He's been one of the more sensible, well, he's the more sensible senator from Arizona. But the other talking point, and the other thing that it does seem that the NRA and their friends do, is they try to demonize a group that's already pretty demonized, and that's people who suffer from mental health issues. And they try to put it all on mentally, on mental illness, even though there are mentally ill people all over the planet, and we're the only country that has the mass shootings. I want to give you an interesting contradiction from Greg Abbott when he tried that game today, because something he said at the top of his thing contradicted that. Take a look.
There was no known mental health history of the gunman. We have a problem with mental health illness in this community.
Daniel Hernandez, how can both of those two things be true?
They can't, and that's the thing. Republicans have been using this tired playbook for the last 11 years that I've been involved. Since I was a 20-year-old intern and I had to literally hold my boss's head so she wouldn't die, Republicans do this thing where they say, one, don't politicize. We need to respect the families. And then the step two is let's create a smoke screen and draw attention away from the real problem, which is the Washington gun lobby. Because what they're essentially going to try and do is run out the clock.
Yeah.
So if it's not the time to talk about what's happening in Texas, let's talk about what happened in New York. Let's talk about what happened in Florida. Heck, let's talk about what happened in Tucson, because there are still people who tell me it's too soon. Don't politicize this. So it's this tired old playbook, and they talk themselves in circles, and no one is brave enough to call them out. That's why people are upset. That's why people are frustrated. That's why people are getting angry and saying it's been a decade since the Gifford shooting, since Sandy Hook, years since what happened in Florida. We need our politicians to stop kowtowing to the gun lobby and to the NRA and actually start doing things. That's why we need more gun violence survivors in Congress, like Lucy McBath, who just won re-election last night, people like Maxwell, people like me, because we need these voices in Congress, because unfortunately, it sounds like we're going to need more people who have personally experienced gun violence to actually do something about it.
Yeah, and you know, it's also fighting the sort of learned helplessness. And I'll go to you first, you know, Maxwell, that people think there's nothing they can do, and so they throw up their hands. But there is something you can do. Just replace all the people who refuse to pass gun reform.
Yeah, no, exactly. I mean, and look, I live in a state where, in Florida, where our governor wants the future to be a place where you're forced to give birth. That child goes to school where they can't learn about real history. They have constant school shooting drills until one day maybe that drill isn't a drill. Right? And that's the future that they're trying to build. Yeah. We cannot let ourselves become desensitized to this violence. It is not normal. And we can't forget that we lose 100 people a day due to gun violence. And even though we have these shootings a lot, y'all, I want everyone to recognize that behind every number, there is a person.
There's a human being.
And we can't forget that.
Last word to you, Daniel Hernandez. Is Kyrsten Sinema, do you believe that she is serving the people of Arizona with her refusal to do anything on this issue?
I think the biggest thing right now is we need politicians to stand up to the Washington gun lobby. When we're talking about corporate influence, there is no greater corporate influence than the Washington gun lobby. So we need everyone right now to help elect people who will be champions for gun violence prevention, not just saying, okay, here are the terrible people from, you know, all these different states, like Governor Abbott, like Governor DeSantis, like Governor Ducey here in Arizona. We need people to stand up and elect more gun violence prevention champions like us, because we need real strong voices that are not going to be desensitized, because we can't be desensitized to the violence that's happening each and every single.
Wishing you both well. You didn't answer my question about Sinema. Very deft. You're already a good politician. State Representative Daniel Hernandez and Maxwell Frost, thank you both very much, and we'll be back after this.
As both of you have laid out, Texas being an example. And I want to ask you about that in a second, Congressman Hurd. But first, just to be clear, Paul, how many guns do you have? I just want everyone to be clear. You're a gun owner.
I have a lot. I'm a gun owner. I'm an avid hunter. I shoot targets, and I love to hunt. And my rights have never been infringed. I support a ban on assault weapons and a ban on high-capacity magazines.
I mean, I'm trying to make the point that, to be clear, you're a hunter and you have a lot of guns, right? So you're not sitting here as somebody who says, okay. So I just.
I'm not anti-gun at all.
Right.
I'm anti. Felons and criminals and terrorists, and I'm anti-assault weapon. You know, we can do a lot of common sense things without infringing on anybody's rights.
And Will, the thing is that the American public agrees with both of you. They agree, right? So Monmouth University did a poll after the Parkland shooting in which 17 students and teachers were killed. And what I found fascinating about this, and I've remembered it ever since, because the NRA comes out and fights for this absolutism. But the people who are the members of the NRA do not actually support the NRA's public position. 69% in that poll of NRA members supported background checks for all gun purchases. That's 69% of NRA members, 83% of the general population. So how is it, Will, that Republican lawmakers, many of them, do not support expanding background checks? They're at odds with the members of the NRA.
Well, I think they're also at odds with a majority of the actual voters in primaries. Most of the voters, look, I'm born and raised in Texas, responsible gun owners, you know, they take several days of training before you get licensed to go hunting. Responsible gun owners lock their guns and the ammunition up so nobody can get access to it. Responsible gun owners know that these things and teach, you know, their children how to properly use this. And so why we're not seeing more movement on these issues? Responsible gun owners do not think terrorists and people that have serious mental health issues should have access to firearms. And so the question is not about responsible gun owners, because responsible gun owners agree with all these things. And just today, I think that the study came out, about 90% of Americans think something needs to be done. But what we have to prevent is we have to prevent everybody going to their same tired corners and arguing for their same tired, you know, case that happens every time one of these things happen. There is not one single solution to this problem. We have to do a lot of things. And at the end of the day, today, there are 19 moms that are not going to be able to tuck their children away. And when you got to understand about Uvalde, this is a small community. They know everybody. This is not just impacting the families. It's not just impacting the spouses of the teachers that were killed. This is impacting everybody. The police officers that went in and saw the carnage, where people had to be ID'd by DNA. This is going to impact people for a long time to come. The people in Sutherland Springs from a couple of years ago are still dealing with the trauma. The people in El Paso are still dealing with the trauma. This is happening all over. This is an area where we should be able to get together and say, hey, 50% of teenage kids in this country shouldn't be afraid of something, a major shooting event happening at their school. And if this continues, guess what's happened? It's going to be harder and harder to get teachers to teach, because they're going to be afraid to be in these schools. So there's a lot of things we can be doing, and it requires leadership from Democrats. It requires the GOP. GOP, if you are going to be the party of law enforcement and be the party of, you know, that's tough on crime, then we got to be tough on mass shootings and have the best ideas on how to prevent this from happening.
All right. Thank you both very much. And next, new calls tonight for armed officers in schools as part of the solution. Well, there is a track record on that, and so we'll look at it. Are more guns really the answer? And a Sandy Hook survivor speaking out, calling for action.
From everyday Americans taking to social media to an NBA coach who doesn't want to talk about basketball.
We can't get numb to this. We can't sit here and just read about it and go, well, let's have a moment of silence.
America's friends and allies expressing deep concern.
La escuela elemental in Texas.
Pope Francis today said it's time to say enough to the indiscriminate trafficking of weapons. In 1996, Australia adopted very tough gun laws after a mass shooting left 35 people dead. New Zealand dramatically changed its own laws and bought back guns after 51 people were killed at 2 mosques in 2019.
When we saw something like that happen, everyone said never again.
After a gunman in Scotland killed 16 children and their teacher in 1996, the UK quickly banned nearly all handguns. NBC's senior international correspondent Keir Simmons says guns are simply not part of British culture.
You are the father of 2 daughters. I'm the father of 2 daughters. Do your children worry about the potential for a mass shooting in their school?
I feel like on this, Tom, we're speaking different languages. My kids don't worry about the dangers of going to school. There's no worries about whether or not someone with a gun, someone with an automatic weapon is going to walk in to my kid's school in the UK.
You are the ones we turn to, yet on this issue, America is one of the most backward places in the world.
Tonight, as always, the world is watching. Tom Costello, NBC News, Washington.
Up next, as we continue tonight, how parents of school-aged children across the country are talking about the news of this attack with their families tonight. From Brooklyn, we're next to the subways.
Avera Health Plans connects to
pleaded with to help find the votes to overturn the 2020 results, won his race. And Governor Brian Kemp easily beat former Senator David Perdue with more than 70% of the vote.
Even in the middle of a tough primary, conservatives across our state didn't listen to the noise. They didn't get distracted. They knew our record of fighting and winning for hardworking Georgians.
Governor Kemp will face Democrat Stacey Abrams in November. That's a rematch from 4 years ago. But yesterday wasn't all bad news for the former president. His pick for the U.S. Senate, former NFL player Herschel Walker, easily won the nomination. And controversial Congresswoman Marjorie Taylor Greene won the backing of 70% of Republicans in her district. Stephen Fowler is here for a closer look at the results. He's a political reporter for Georgia Public Broadcasting. Stephen Fowler, welcome back to the NewsHour. So we see that some of former President Trump's endorsees did well, others didn't. What does this say to you, if you put it all together, about his influence among Georgia voters, and also, frankly, the strength of the big lie that he actually won and Joe Biden didn't in 2020?
Well, Judy, I think there's a ceiling on just how far focusing on false claims about the 2020 election can get you as a Republican candidate. We saw that with David Perdue struggling and Jody Hice struggling in the Secretary of State's race. But the reason Trump's candidates lost as well is that you had two popular incumbents that have a long record with Georgia voters, that have a long conservative record. For example, Brian Kemp flexed the power of his office in recent years to cut taxes for people and to pay teachers more and state employees more and to enact conservative policies around abortion and voting rights and firearms, and really didn't give Georgia voters that were Republicans much reason to go with somebody else. Same with Secretary of State Brad Raffensperger, who touted Georgia's election laws and record early voting turnout to say that he's the one that should be in charge.
So when it comes to belief and, as we said, the big lie, do these results give you a sense of how firm a hold that view has on Republican voters in Georgia?
I think the message that Republican voters are sending is that it's time to move on and that there is a future for the Republican Party, not the past. And the resounding margins for Kemp and even Raffensperger show that most voters are looking ahead and not focused on the past, and that Trump's sway doesn't necessarily carry as much weight as it used to.
And then we're including in that a look at Herschel Walker, but as you point out, he didn't have the significant opposition that the others did. Let me ask you about Marjorie Taylor Greene, Congresswoman, controversial. What about her race, her congressional district?
I mean, Marjorie Taylor Greene is exactly what the voters in that district want in a representative. She also, too, now has the power of incumbency and time in office, and many of the people running against her ran as an opposition to Marjorie Taylor Greene, and that's just something that the voters didn't want. She's very controversial, but she is very representative of Trump's policies. Obviously, Trump endorsed her. She's very close to the former president, and for the people of Northwest Georgia, which is one of the most conservative districts in the country, that's exactly who they want representing them in the halls of Congress.
So, Stephen Fowler, look ahead to the fall, to November for us. What does it look like for Brian Kemp facing in a rematch with Stacey Abrams?
Well, Brian Kemp won by about 55,000 votes in 2018, and Georgia's politics has become even more of a hardened battleground since then. So both sides are expecting a really, really tough race. I mean, Kemp is riding this wave of incumbency where he had a decisive victory at a time when people were saying maybe he would face a runoff. So it's going to be tight, it's going to be expensive, and it's going to be really a nationally watched election.
And the Senate race? Tight as well?
Absolutely. Raphael Warnock is the Democrat who won in the 2021 special election and is one of the most vulnerable incumbents on the ballot across the country. And Herschel Walker has a lot of celebrity power in Georgia that Trump's endorsement probably wouldn't even matter because Georgians love him so much and know him so much from his football past. But Walker has a past where there's some questions about domestic violence allegations and overstated resumes. So this, too, will be a deciding race for Georgia, but also potentially for the U.S. Senate and who controls it.
All eyes on the Peach State now and for the months to come. Thank you very much, Stephen Fowler.
Thank you.
His grandmother and grandfather shot his grandmother after an argument and drove here. The people who live around here are used to crashes and the sound of gunfire because we're so close to the border. The coyotes and smugglers often run from Border Patrol and then try to lose them in this area of town coming up from the border, which is just 20 or so miles down the road. This is the first big town they get to. So the neighbors didn't really think all that much of it, even though they had kids inside the school when they first heard the gunshots, and then they saw the hundreds of officers that would end up showing up. In the beginning, it was an all-call. The Border Patrol showed up. Anybody with a badge and a gun to run towards the sound of gunfire. We understand that the gunman barricaded himself inside this fourth grade classroom. Finally, they were able to break in. A Border Patrol agent who is a member of the tactical team for Border Patrol took a bullet through his hat. He did not even have time to put on his tactical gear and his protection gear before running into the school. And that's where we want to bring in Danny Coulson, former head of the FBI's hostage rescue team, the foremost unit in the world to deal with situations like this. Danny, we've come so far from Columbine, where officers stood outside, and for whatever we talk about the evil that happened here, you got to take a moment and just think and thank those who run to the sound of gunfire.
Oh my gosh, thank you for allowing me to talk about this. I have a lot of experience with Border Patrol agents, and they are amazing. They're like the current day Knights Templar. They protect our society, they try to protect our borders, but are not being supported in that. But the fact that they did what they did here is amazing. My job was for a long time rescuing hostages, but I had explosive breaching, stun grenades, gas, had a lot of equipment. They went in there with a gun, and they took on this guy in face of gunfire, had a round hit the agent in the foot, and one grazed his head. He went in there probably expecting to die, and he did it anyway. I can't say enough about the Border Patrol, the local police department there, the sheriff's department, and we should be thanking God that we have them on our side now, and we have them in the face of these monsters that are killing our children.
Yeah, and without them, far more would have died here. We know that Ramos had a lot more rounds of ammunition with him when he was shot and killed. Wasn't wearing body armor, but was wearing a tactical vest at the time. And this is very different because of this community. 16,000 people. It's got sort of an outsized amount of law enforcement because this is where so much of the federal law enforcement who works down on the border lives. Danny, how is it different for sheriff's deputies, police officers, and Border Patrol who are coming to a school that they know their kids, their colleagues' kids, their friends' kids go to school, evidenced by the fact that one sheriff's deputy is the father of a victim?
Yeah, I saw that, and they're amazing people. I mean, they're dedicated to law enforcement. They're very compassionate. Most of them are fathers. Some are mothers, and I think it's amazing what they did. I cannot give them enough credit for what they did there and the courage they showed. I mean, they weren't ready. They just responded to a gunfight and went in and engaged and killed the guy. And that's saying a lot about the quality of our law enforcement and these people around the country who denigrate them and want to disorganize them. That's crazy. We need more of these guys.
You certainly need a lot more of the people who ran into the building behind me. There's going to be a lot of discussion going forward about the red flags, what people know, what should we have known, what should we have seen that would have made this preventable. And there's been a lot of made, and Greg Abbott made a lot of the issue of these Facebook messages where he said in the hour before, as reported by Brian Anton, oh, I shot my grandmother, oh, I'm going to shoot my grandmother, oh, I'm going to have a school shooting. At some level, is it possible to try and question every single person's Facebook message?
Absolutely not. I love the governor. I'm going to vote for him. I voted for him before, but we just have a little bit of disagreement. There were no red flags here. There were some yellow flags maybe, but I'm in this business, and I will say this categorically, that if you don't have actionable intelligence, you can't prevent these things. You can prepare for them, the eventuality, but you can't prevent these. I know we like to say we can, but we can't.
Hey,
I'm sorry,
Danny,
that's just not the way it
Danny,
works.
yeah, no, well, and Danny, you make a great point, is that the way they were prepared here, it was pretty incredible. The way the agents were prepared simply to go into battle in a hat and not their tactical gear. Danny Coulson
Yes.
of the FBI's hostage rescue team. We'll be back with some final thoughts in just a minute.
Thank you.
They want to propel you.
It's spotless under the...
What does that mean? That means the politicians are in it for themselves at the expense of American citizens. These are the kind of conversations that we have to have. We understand that there's going to be violence, unfortunately. There's going to be crazy behavior, unfortunately. The kind of reprehensible, unconscionable things that we have seen. Unfortunately, ladies and gentlemen, this is not the first time. Sandy Hook, 10 years ago, 28 people died. People were killed. Colorado, Minnesota, various other places throughout this nation. We've seen mass shootings. We lament it. We understand what needs to be done. But we got elected officials that won't do anything. Why aren't you doing anything? Because you act like petulant children. You talk about one another like dogs, and then expect us to believe that you can get together and negotiate and work things out for the betterment of this nation when you don't give a damn about the nation at all. You got 435 representatives in the U.S. House of Congress. You got 100 senators, 50 Democrats, 2 independents who caucus with the Democrats, and 50 Republican senators. Somehow, some way, this can't become law where you got background checks to make sure you can keep the AR-15 rifles out of the hands of children. Because somehow, some way, you're using that nugget that someone may want. You're trying to throw other things into the equation. You can't reach an accord, and then you go in front of the cameras, get networks into you, making you believe y'all can't come to an accord because it's his fault, it's his fault. And you're talking about one another, and nothing gets done. They have sold out America. They have sold us down the river. There's an election coming November 8th of 2022. Hundreds of houses are up to provoke change, and some Senate seats as well. Get all of them out, all of them, because they resemble indentured servants to lobbyists. They have sold us out. Treat them like you treat sellouts to this country. That's what they are.
And Greeny, when Stephen A. says children, that's actually who it is. 70% of these mass shootings are by individuals 18 years of age or younger. 70%, each of them with an AR-15 weapon.
Lisa, do you have a final thought?
We're angry. We're sad. A lot of guilt, too, don't we? We're up here. They're down there. We in the world. And I've spent all day asking myself, why am I here having fun? And those parents are there to bury their kids.
Whole range of emotion that we have here. 10 years ago, I had elementary school age children in Westport, Connecticut, which is only about a half hour away from Newtown, the exact time of the Sandy Hook tragedies. If you had told me then that 10 years later, not would things not have changed substantially, but worse, that we'd be living in a country where well over 200 mass already, and we have had far fewer so far in 2022. I can think of to tell you is I wouldn't have believed that 10 years ago. All right, with that, we will turn our attention back to the events of the game tonight, which, of course, is why we are here. Much more as we continue in just a moment. Thanks for being with us in Miami on ESPN.
Jokes are meant to point out absurdity. They're meant to make people laugh. They're meant to be enjoyed. And
all right, I'm tired of moments of silence. Enough. There's 50 right now who refuse to vote on H.R. 8, which is a background check rule that the House passed a couple of years ago. It's been sitting there for 2 years. And there's a reason they won't vote on it, to hold on to power. But I want every person here, every person listening to this, to think about your own child or grandchild or mother or father or sister, brother. How would you feel if this happened to you today? We can't get numb to this. We can't sit here and just read about it and go, well, let's have a moment of silence. You know, come on, Mavs, let's go. And 50 senators in Washington are going to hold us hostage. You realize that 90% of Americans, regardless of political party, want background check, universal background check. 90% of us, we are being held hostage by 50 senators in Washington who refuse to even put it to a vote, despite what we, the American people, want. They won't vote on it because they want to hold on to their own power. It's pathetic. Not enough.
Had enough? I've had enough. We only need 4 more senators. 4 more. I said 11. The senator said we only need 4 more. That will negate Manchin and Sinema, and it will get gun reform passed, police reform passed, the things we want passed. That's it. All in with Chris Hayes starts now.
Good evening and welcome to Tucker Carlson tonight. In the past, separate teenage boys identifying massacres in public places. 14th, 18-year-old Peyton Gendron shoppers in a grocery store in Buffalo. Today, 18-year-old Salvador Ramos, small children and 2 teachers at a school in Texas. Both and Ramos were very obviously mentally ill, and them knew that. Both killers were people they planned to commit a mass shooting. So what can we learn from this? First, most obvious answer is that the system in place didn't work. Gendron's teachers hospital for evaluation. They knew he was a threat. They tried their best. He committed a massacre anyway. So we know for it isn't working, but we should be honest enough to acknowledge that it's very hard to know what to do instead. Despite what you the problem isn't that we don't care enough. There's not a person in this country who is not horrified of murdered children. It's the worst thing, and everybody thinks that. The problem is that the human mind is much more complex and harder to control than we like to admit. A person who is intent on committing violence is very hard to stop under any circumstances. An act of Congress isn't going to do gun control. There are more guns in this country than there are people. There always have been. However you feel about that fact, you can acknowledge that we will get rid of all of those guns. The Constitution prohibits that, and you would set off a civil war if you tried to do it.
Learned that he shot his grandmother before entering Robb Elementary School and barricading himself in a classroom full of students. With a rifle, police eventually storming the building and killing him. And tonight, we have new details of possible warning signs, posts on social media, and the messages the gunman sent in the moments before he ran into that school. But we want to start our coverage tonight with a city in mourning. Country. You and I and everyone who has been impacted by what has happened. Learn more about the girls and boys and the 2 women who died. 21 families right now are facing the unimaginable, learning after agonizing hours of waiting that their children, in fact, years old, were killed in their classroom. Here is correspondent Brooke Schaefer tonight.
Small, close-knit community of Uvalde, where everyone knows each other, the news spread not fast enough. Were caught in the middle of responders trying to attend to victims, while others tried to reunite families. For some, it was hours of not knowing where their child was. Like for the family of Ellie Lugo, they turned to social asking people to look for their daughter, hoping she'd run from the school, from the carnage. In the end, their 10-year-old was one of the 15 students who died.
She was very happy and very outgoing. Dance and sing and play sports. She was enjoyed being with the family.
She's a girl.
She was.